I'm Natalie, 32 years old, and during Christmas dinner, my parents announced that I was a failed mother with a worthless daughter. They told us to pack our things and leave because we didn't deserve to be with the real family. I didn't beg or defend myself. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out a key, and placed it on the table. 1 minute later, they were calling me back desperately. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt undervalued by your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me take you back to how this all started. People always assume that single mothers struggle financially, but that wasn't my story. I had a good job as a marketing director at a tech company, owned my apartment outright, and never missed a bill. My 8-year-old daughter Emma was thriving in school, taking piano lessons, and had more opportunities than most kids her age. But according to my parents, none of that mattered because I didn't have a ring on my finger. It started when I was 24 and got pregnant. The father wasn't interested in sticking around, which honestly was fine by me. I'd rather raise Emma alone than with someone who didn't want to be there. But my parents saw it as the ultimate failure. Not the successful career I built, not the stable home I provided, not the happy, confident child I was raising. All they saw was shame. My sister Rebecca had done everything right in their eyes. She'd married her college boyfriend at 25, had 2 kids by 30, and played the perfect wife role. Never mind that her husband barely worked while she juggled 3 part-time jobs to keep their house. Never mind that she called me crying about money troubles every other week. In my parents' minds, she was the success story because she had a wedding ring. The irony? I was probably the most financially stable person in our entire family. While Rebecca struggled to pay her mortgage and my parents lived off their modest retirement savings, I was building wealth, saving for Emma's college fund, and actually enjoying life. But somehow, I was still the family disappointment. Every family gathering came with subtle digs. When are you going to find Emma a father figure? It must be so hard raising her alone. Rebecca's kids are so lucky to have both parents. The comments were always wrapped in fake concern, but the message was clear. I wasn't good enough. What hurt the most was watching how it affected Emma. She started asking why she didn't have a daddy like her cousins. She began to shrink around my parents, as if she could sense their disapproval. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to feel like she needs to prove her worth to her own grandparents. But I kept showing up to family events, kept sending birthday cards, kept trying to maintain relationships because that's what you do for family, even when that family treats you like a second-class citizen. The pattern had been set for years, but it crystallized during Rebecca's wedding planning 3 years ago. While she stressed about flowers and venues with a budget that barely covered a decent reception, my parents kept making pointed comments about how meaningful it was to celebrate love and commitment. Meanwhile, when Emma's birthday came around, they showed up with clearance toys and left early. The contrast was impossible to ignore, but I swallowed it like I always did. At least Rebecca is building something real, my mother had said once, not realizing I could hear her talking to my aunt on the phone. Natalie just, well, she made her choices. Made my choices. As if getting pregnant was some deliberate attempt to ruin their reputation. As if working 70-hour weeks to build my career while raising a child was somehow less valuable than staying in a mediocre marriage for appearances. The judgment extended beyond just me to Emma, which was unforgivable. During family dinners, Rebecca's kids got praised for every minor accomplishment, while Emma's straight A's and piano recitals barely got acknowledgement. When Emma won the school science fair, my mother's response was, "That's nice, dear," before immediately asking about my nephew's soccer season. Emma noticed. Kids always notice. "Why don't Grandma and Grandpa ask about my school?" she asked one night after a particularly painful family dinner. "They're just busy thinking about other things," I told her, hating myself for making excuses for their behavior. Am I not important? That question broke something in me. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her grandparents have decided she's somehow worth less because her father isn't in the picture? How do you protect her from the realization that their love comes with conditions? I started limiting our visits, making excuses about work or Emma's activities, but that only gave them more ammunition. Now I was isolating Emma from the family, being difficult and oversensitive. The financial dynamics made everything worse. While I was building my career and saving money, Rebecca and her husband were constantly struggling. Car repairs, medical bills, home emergencies, they always seemed to be one disaster away from financial ruin. And guess who they all looked to for help? "Natalie, you're doing so well," my father would say whenever Rebecca needed money. "Maybe you could help out your sister." I did help, more times than I can count. 1,000 here for car repairs, 500 there for unexpected bills, never asking for it back because family doesn't keep score, according to my mother. But somehow, when I needed emotional support or simple acknowledgement of my achievements, the well ran dry. The breaking point came last summer when Rebecca's family went on vacation to Disney World, funded partially by my loan, while Emma and I stayed home because I was saving for her future college expenses. The photos on social media were torture. My parents beaming with pride at the perfect family vacation while Emma asked why we couldn't go too. That's when I realized the truth. To them, Emma and I weren't really family. We were obligations. Reminders of my failure that they tolerated but never truly accepted. The beach house idea started 2 years ago during one of those perfect spring days when my father gets nostalgic about his childhood summers on the coast. We were all at Sunday dinner, a tradition my mother maintained with religious fervor, when he started reminiscing about family vacations and building memories. "I've been thinking," he announced, cutting into his roast beef with the ceremonial precision he applied to all major pronouncements. "Your mother and I aren't getting any younger. We should do something meaningful with our savings while we can still enjoy it." My mother's eyes lit up. She'd been dropping hints about a beach house for months, leaving real estate magazines strategically placed around their living room, bookmarking oceanfront properties on her laptop. "What did you have in mind?" Rebecca asked, though we all knew where this was headed. "A beach house," my father said, as if the idea had just occurred to him. "Somewhere the whole family can gather, make memories with the grandchildren, build something lasting." The vision he painted was seductive. Lazy summer afternoons, holiday gatherings with ocean views, Emma and Rebecca's kids building sandcastles while the adults relaxed on the deck, a place where the family could come together, where every vacation would strengthen our bonds. "It sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely excited. "Where were you thinking?" They'd already done their research. Of course. A 3-bedroom cottage just 2 hours from the city, close enough for weekend trips, but far enough to feel like an escape. The price was substantial, but manageable if they pooled their retirement savings. Then came the pitch. "The thing is," my mother said carefully, "we'd love to make this bigger than just our little cottage, something the whole family could really use and enjoy." "What do you mean?" Rebecca asked. "Well," my father continued, "if we all went in on it together, we could afford something really special. A bigger house, better location, maybe even waterfront." The idea gained momentum quickly. Instead of a modest cottage, we could get a 5-bedroom house with direct beach access. Rebecca and I would each contribute to the down payment and monthly expenses, and in return, we'd all have equal access to family paradise. "Think about it," my mother said, her voice warm with genuine excitement. "Every Christmas, every summer vacation, every long weekend, we could all be together. The grandchildren would have such incredible memories." It was appealing, I had to admit. Emma would love having a beach house to visit, and the idea of family unity was exactly what I'd been craving. Plus, real estate was a good investment. Even if family dynamics were complicated, the financial aspect made sense. "How would it work exactly?" I asked, ever the practical one. "Simple," my father said. "We each put in $40,000 for the down payment and closing costs. Then we split the monthly mortgage, insurance, and maintenance 3 ways. Everyone gets their own set of keys in equal time." Rebecca looked hesitant. "$40,000 is a lot." "It's an investment," my mother assured her. "And think about all the money we'll save on vacation rentals. This will pay for itself." I ran the numbers in my head. 40,000 was significant but manageable with my savings. The monthly costs would be less than what I typically spent on weekend trips with Emma. And the promise of regular family time was worth almost any price. "I'm in," I said. Rebecca still looked uncertain, but after some encouragement from our parents and promises that they'd help if money got tight, she agreed too. Within a month, we'd found the perfect place. A stunning beach house with panoramic ocean views, a wraparound deck, and direct access to a private stretch of sand. The papers were signed, keys were distributed, and everyone got copies of the deed showing our equal ownership shares. Standing on that deck for the first time, watching Emma run toward the waves with pure joy, I thought we'd finally found our way to being a real family. I had no idea I'd just bought myself years of heartbreak. The problems started immediately, though I didn't recognize them at first. "Oh, we're planning to spend the first few weekends getting the house set up," my mother explained when I asked about bringing Emma for the opening weekend. "Just basic things like furniture arrangement, finding the best grocery stores, figuring out the Wi-Fi situation. Probably better to wait until we have everything sorted out." That made sense. Moving into a new place always requires adjustment time. So I waited. 2 weeks later. "We're still working on some maintenance issues. The deck railing needs repair, and there's a problem with one of the bedroom doors. Safety first, especially with little ones around." Another delay. Still reasonable. A month in. Rebecca's family is there this weekend dealing with some plumbing issues. Might be noisy with the contractors coming in and out. I started to notice a pattern. Every time I suggested bringing Emma for a visit, there was always a reason why that particular weekend wouldn't work. Meanwhile, my parents' car and Rebecca's SUV were regularly absent from their driveways on Friday afternoons. The first time I drove by the beach house unannounced, just happening to be in the area after a client meeting, both cars were in the driveway. Through the windows, I could see Rebecca's kids playing on the deck while the adults relaxed with drinks. Family bonding time, just not with my part of the family. When I called to ask about it later, my mother's explanation was breezy. Oh, it was a last-minute thing. Rebecca needed to get away from the city for her stress. And we thought it would be nice to have the grandchildren experience the ocean. We would have invited you, but we know how busy you are with work. The excuse was carefully crafted, true enough that I couldn't argue without seeming petty, but thin enough that the message was clear. They'd prefer Emma and me not be there. The financial requests started shortly after. The property taxes came in higher than expected, my father informed me via email, along with a bill for an extra $800. Just this once to get caught up. Then it was emergency roof repairs after a storm. Then new appliances when the old ones suddenly broke down. Then landscape maintenance that couldn't wait. Each request came with an apology and assurance that it was temporary, just this once, unexpected circumstances. But Rebecca was always having cash flow problems. My parents were on a fixed income, and somehow I was the only one who could cover these urgent expenses. The pattern crystallized during what I started calling the Great Scheduling Mystery. Every time I requested specific dates for Emma and me to use the house, I was told those weekends were already taken. Rebecca's already claimed that weekend for her anniversary. Your father and I will be hosting book club that Saturday. Those dates conflict with the children's school break schedule. But when I offered alternative weekends, those were somehow unavailable too. Eventually, I realized I was being managed, scheduled around rather than scheduled with. The breakthrough came when Emma's school had a teacher planning day, giving us an unexpected Monday off. I called Sunday night to let them know we'd drive out the next morning. Oh no, my mother said, caught off guard. Actually, Rebecca's family is coming down tonight. I thought they were there last weekend. Well, yes, but little Sarah had such a wonderful time that Rebecca thought it would be nice to extend the visit. Mom, I pay a third of all the expenses for this house. And Emma has been asking about going to the beach for months. Can't Rebecca's family cut their visit short by one day? Silence. Then, Natalie, honey, you know how much the grandchildren love it there. And Rebecca's been having a hard time lately. Always Rebecca's hard time. Never Emma's disappointment. That's when I started keeping track. Over 18 months, Emma and I had used the beach house exactly 3 times. Always midweek, always during school time, and always for just one night. Rebecca's family, meanwhile, seemed to have permanent residence every other weekend. The mortgage payment, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs came out of my bank account like clockwork. But the house itself might as well have been located on another planet for all the good it did Emma and me. My daughter stopped asking about going to the beach house. She'd learned, even at 8 years old, not to hope for things that never materialized. That hurt more than the money. November arrived with an early cold snap that made everyone start talking about Christmas plans. My mother called on a Tuesday evening while I was helping Emma with homework at our kitchen table. We need to finalize the holiday schedule, she announced without preamble. Your father wants to know if you and Emma will be joining us for Christmas Eve dinner this year. The question was loaded. Last year, I'd begged off the Christmas Eve gathering because Emma had been fighting a stomach bug. The year before, we'd left early when my uncle made comments about broken homes producing troubled children. We'll be there, I said, because despite everything, I kept hoping for moments of genuine family connection. Wonderful, my mother said, her voice warming. Rebecca's bringing her famous green bean casserole, and your father is handling the turkey. Maybe you could contribute dessert. I agreed to make Emma's favorite chocolate cake, thinking it might be nice for her to share something she loved with the family. And Natalie, my mother added casually, try to keep things light this year. No work talk, no complications. Your father's been stressed lately, and Christmas should be about family harmony. Complications. That was code for, don't mention any of the ways we've marginalized you. Don't talk about the beach house you pay for but can't use. Don't bring up the financial support you provide without reciprocation. Don't mention the subtle but persistent favoritism toward Rebecca's family. Keep things light. Be grateful for the crumbs. The next few weeks brought the usual pre-holiday tensions. Rebecca called twice asking for advice about Christmas gifts she couldn't afford. My parents sent Emma a generic card with $20 inside. The same amount they'd given her every birthday and holiday since she was born, despite inflation and the fact that she was getting older. Meanwhile, Rebecca's kids each got elaborate wish lists discussed in detail during family phone calls, complete with strategic shopping plans to maximize impact. Sarah really wants that American Girl doll, my mother gushed during one conversation. Rebecca found it on sale, but it's still almost $200. I told her we'd cover the difference as part of their Christmas gift. $200 for one gift, while Emma got $20 and a card. Emma, bless her, never complained. She'd learned to manage her expectations around my family, which broke my heart. An 8-year-old shouldn't have to protect herself emotionally from her own grandparents. The week before Christmas, Emma came home from school excited about her winter concert performance. She'd been chosen to play a piano solo, a huge honor for a third grader. "Can Grandma and Grandpa come?" she asked hopefully. "And Aunt Rebecca and Uncle Mike and the cousins?" I called my mother that evening. "Emma has a piano recital on December 22nd. She'd love for everyone to come." "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said. "But December 22nd, that's the day Rebecca's family is going to the beach house for their Christmas mini vacation. They planned it months ago." "The beach house?" I repeated. "In December?" Rebecca thought it would be romantic to have Christmas by the ocean. Very cozy. They're making it a whole long weekend. Another spontaneous beach house trip that somehow everyone knew about except me. I bit back my immediate response and tried a different approach. Maybe they could delay by one day? Emma's worked so hard on this solo and she specifically asked for the whole family to be there. "Natalie, you know how important family traditions are to Rebecca. And they've already taken time off work, told the children. It wouldn't be fair to ask them to change their plans now. But it was perfectly fair to ask Emma to accept that she wasn't a priority. What if we moved the beach house visit to another weekend? I could even contribute extra for any change fees." "Honey," my mother interrupted gently, "you know how complicated these things get when too many people try to coordinate. Rebecca's family needs this little getaway. Emma will understand." Emma would understand because Emma always had to understand. Because Emma was the one who learned to expect less, want less, hope for less. I hung up and looked at my daughter, who was practicing piano in our living room, her small fingers moving carefully across the keys as she prepared for a performance that half her family would miss for a spontaneous vacation to the house I helped pay for. Something inside me started to shift. A quiet anger that I'd been suppressing for years began to crystallize into something harder and more determined. Christmas Eve dinner suddenly felt less like an obligation and more like a reckoning. Christmas Eve arrived with the kind of crisp winter air that made everything feel sharp and clear. Emma spent the morning helping me bake the chocolate cake, chattering about school friends and piano lessons while carefully measuring ingredients. "Do you think Grandma will like my new song?" she asked while stirring the batter. "I've been practicing extra hard." "I think she'll love it," I said, though my mother hadn't mentioned Emma's upcoming recital once since our conversation about the beach house schedule. We drove to my parents' house as the afternoon light faded, Emma clutching a carefully wrapped present she'd made at school, a painted picture frame with a photo of herself at the piano. She'd been excited about giving it to her grandparents all week. "Maybe they'll put it on their mantle," she said hopefully as we walked up the familiar sidewalk. The house was warm and bright, filled with the sounds of Rebecca's kids running around while holiday music played in the background. My parents' faces lit up when Rebecca's family arrived, genuine joy and excitement that stood in sharp contrast to the polite acknowledgement Emma and I typically received. "There are my beautiful grandchildren," my mother exclaimed, sweeping Rebecca's kids into enthusiastic hugs while Emma hung back slightly, waiting her turn. "Hi, Grandma," Emma said when my mother finally noticed her. "Oh, hello, sweetheart," my mother replied, offering a brief hug before immediately turning back to ask 7-year-old Sarah about her Christmas wish list. Dinner unfolded with the usual dynamics. Rebecca's kids dominated conversation with stories about school and friends, each anecdote met with rapt attention from my parents. When Emma tried to share news about her piano recital, she was quickly interrupted by my nephew's description of his soccer championship game. "That's wonderful, honey," my father said to Emma when there was finally a break in conversation. "Music is nice. Nice. Her months of practice and upcoming solo performance were nice." The real tension began during dessert when my mother started discussing holiday traditions and family values. "Christmas has always been about bringing the family together," she said, cutting into the chocolate cake I'd made. "Creating memories, showing the children what really matters." "Speaking of family memories," I said carefully, "I wanted to mention again that Emma's piano recital is tomorrow evening. She's performing a solo piece she's been working on for months." The table went quiet. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably while my parents exchanged glances. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear," my mother said with forced enthusiasm. "I'm sure she'll do beautifully. Would you like to come?" Emma asked directly, her 8-year-old voice cutting through the adult awkwardness with typical childhood honesty. Another pause. My father cleared his throat. "Well, sweetheart, Aunt Rebecca's family is taking a special Christmas trip tomorrow and we promised to help them get ready. We're going to the beach house, Sarah announced excitedly. Mommy says we can build sandcastles even in winter. Emma's face fell slightly, but she recovered quickly. That sounds fun, she said politely. Maybe next time, my mother added weakly. There won't be a next time, I said quietly. This was Emma's first solo performance. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Rebecca looked down at her plate while my parents struggled to find a response that wouldn't sound as dismissive as their actions. Natalie, my father said, his voice carrying the warning tone I remembered from childhood. Let's not make this difficult. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm just pointing out that my 8-year-old daughter has been preparing for months for something she's proud of, and her family is choosing a last-minute beach trip instead. It's not last minute, Rebecca protested. We've been planning this for weeks. Funny how I never heard about it until after Emma's recital was already scheduled. The facade of holiday cheer was cracking, revealing the underlying tensions we'd all been pretending didn't exist. My parents looked uncomfortable. Rebecca was defensive, and Emma was starting to realize this wasn't a typical family disagreement. Maybe we should talk about something else, my mother suggested brightly. But I was done talking about something else. Done pretending everything was fine. Done protecting everyone else's feelings at the expense of my daughter's dignity. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, I think we should talk about exactly this. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Everyone could sense we'd crossed some invisible line from polite family dinner into something much more dangerous. My father's jaw tightened. Rebecca reached for her wine glass. Emma looked between the adults with the alert wariness of a child who'd learned to read tension. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, absolutely ready for whatever was about to happen. Actually, I said, setting down my fork, I think we should talk about exactly this. The silence stretched like a taut wire. My mother's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down with unnecessary precision. Rebecca suddenly became fascinated with her wine glass, swirling the contents like she was conducting a very important scientific experiment. Natalie, my father said, his voice carrying that familiar warning tone. This isn't the time or place. When is the time and place? I asked calmly. When would be appropriate to discuss why my daughter gets $20 in a generic card while Rebecca's kids get $200 dolls? When can we talk about why I pay for a beach house that I can't use? When exactly do I get to mention that Emma's piano recital apparently matters less than a spontaneous holiday trip? Emma looked up at me with wide eyes. She wasn't used to hearing me speak up like this. None of them were. We never said Emma's recital didn't matter, my mother protested, but her voice lacked conviction. You didn't have to say it. Your actions said it loud and clear. I turned to Emma, who was sitting very still beside me. Emma, honey, when is your recital? Tomorrow at 7, she said quietly. And what time are you leaving for the beach house? I asked Rebecca. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. We were planning to leave around noon to avoid traffic. So you could absolutely attend a 7 p.m. recital and still have your beach vacation. You're choosing not to. It's not that simple, my father interjected. Rebecca's family has been planning this trip. For weeks, I know. You mentioned that. What I don't understand is how the entire family knew about it, except the person who pays for the house. The room felt smaller suddenly, the holiday decorations seeming almost mocking in their cheerful brightness. Rebecca's kids had stopped their chatter and were looking between the adults with confused expressions. Maybe we should discuss this privately, my mother suggested, glancing meaningfully at the children. Why? So you can dismiss my concerns again without witnesses? So you can tell me I'm being oversensitive or difficult? I shook my head. No, I think the children should hear this. Especially Emma. She should understand why her family operates the way it does. Natalie, you're being dramatic, Rebecca said, finally speaking up. We've never excluded you intentionally. I almost laughed. The audacity was impressive, really. Never excluded me intentionally? Rebecca, when was the last time you called to invite Emma and me to the beach house? When was the last time you asked what dates would work for us before making your plans? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. That's what I thought. I looked around the table at faces that were suddenly struggling to maintain the facade of family harmony. You know what's funny? I keep showing up to these dinners thinking maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time you'll treat Emma like she matters as much as her cousins. Maybe this time you'll acknowledge that I'm not the family failure you've decided I am. Nobody thinks you're a failure, my mother said weakly. Don't they? I turned to face her directly. When was the last time you celebrated any of my achievements? When was the last time you bragged about my career the way you brag about Rebecca's marriage? When was the last time you made Emma feel like she was as important as your other grandchildren? The questions hung in the air like accusations, because that's exactly what they were. You're twisting things, my father said, his voice getting harder. We've always supported both our daughters equally. Equally? The word came out sharp enough to cut glass. Dad, I need you to look me in the eye and tell me honestly that you've treated Emma the same way you treat Rebecca's kids. He couldn't do it. None of them could meet my eyes. That's when I knew we'd finally reached the truth. The conversation spiraled quickly from there. What had started as pointed questions became accusations, defenses, and the kind of ugly truths that families spend years avoiding. The problem, my mother said, her voice taking on that cutting edge she used when she was done pretending to be nice, is that you've never learned to accept constructive criticism. Ever since you were young, you've been defensive about your choices. My choices, I repeated slowly. You mean like the choice to build a successful career? The choice to provide a stable home for my daughter? The choice to pay for a beach house that benefits everyone but me? You know that's not what I mean. Then please, enlighten me. What choices are we talking about? My father set down his napkin with deliberate precision. I think what your mother is trying to say is that creating a stable family environment requires certain foundations. Foundations, I said. Like a husband, you mean? Like commitment to traditional family values, he clarified, as if that made it better. The mask was finally coming off. After years of subtle implications and coded language, they were saying it outright. My worth as a person was tied to my marital status. So in your opinion, no matter how well I provide for Emma, no matter how happy and healthy she is, no matter how successful my career has been, I'm still a failure because I don't have a ring on my finger? That's not what we're saying, Rebecca interjected, though her voice suggested she wasn't entirely sure what they were saying. Then what are you saying? I challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're saying that Emma is somehow less valuable as a grandchild because her father isn't in the picture. It sounds like you're saying my 8-year-old daughter deserves less love, less attention, and fewer opportunities because I had the audacity to raise her as a single mother. Now you're being ridiculous, my father said, his patience finally snapping. Nobody said anything about Emma being less valuable. You didn't have to say it. You've shown it every single day for 8 years. The room went deadly quiet. Even the children had stopped making noise, sensing that something serious was happening in the adult world. I think you need to calm down, my mother said in the tone she'd used when I was a teenager having what she called dramatic episodes. Calm down? I laughed and it came out bitter. You know what? You're right. I should calm down. I should accept that my family thinks I'm a disappointment. I should smile and nod while you ignore my daughter's achievements. I should keep writing checks for a beach house I'm never allowed to use and pretend it's perfectly normal. Nobody forced you to contribute to the beach house, my father said coldly. That was your choice. My choice based on promises you made about equal access and family togetherness. Promises you've broken repeatedly. The conversation was escalating beyond repair, but I couldn't stop myself. Years of swallowed words were pouring out like water from a broken dam. You want to know what I think? My father said, standing up from the table. I think you're jealous of Rebecca's success, and you're taking it out on the whole family. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma made a small sound beside me, and I realized she was starting to understand exactly how her grandfather viewed our little family unit. Success? I said quietly. What success exactly? The marriage to a man who barely works while she struggles with 3 part-time jobs? The constant financial crises that somehow become my responsibility? The children who are drowning in debt because their parents can't manage money? At least she's building something real, my mother snapped. At least she's providing her children with a proper family structure. And there it was. The truth they'd been dancing around for 8 years. A proper family structure, I repeated. Is that what you call it when a husband contributes nothing while his wife works herself into the ground? Is that proper? Or is it only proper because there's a man in the picture, regardless of how useless he is? That's enough, my father said, his voice rising. But I was just getting started. 8 years of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family had built up a reservoir of anger that was finally overflowing. No, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough. That's when my father completely lost his composure. You are a failed mother, he said, his voice loud enough to carry throughout the house. And that child is going to be just as much of a disappointment as you are. The words landed like bombs in the sudden silence. Emma's sharp intake of breath cut through my shock. Rebecca's kids stared in wide-eyed confusion. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, but not in horror, in embarrassment at his bluntness, not his sentiment. She's 8 years old, I whispered, but my voice had no power behind it. She's old enough to see what kind of example you're setting, he continued, apparently deciding that subtlety was no longer necessary. Growing up in a broken home, learning that commitment and responsibility don't matter, learning that it's acceptable to have children without providing them with proper families. I felt Emma shrinking beside me, and something in my chest cracked. Pack your things, my father said with finality. Both of you. You clearly don't want to be part of this family, so stop pretending. Get out of our house and stay out until you learn how to show some respect and gratitude for everything we've done for you. The cruelty was breathtaking in its completeness. Not only were they rejecting me, they were rejecting an innocent 8-year-old child whose only crime was being born to an unmarried mother. Pack your things and leave, he said with ice-cold finality. You two don't deserve to be with the real family. Emma started to cry. Quiet, heartbroken tears that made my vision blur with rage. But I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't try to negotiate or explain or defend. Instead, I reached into my pocket. My hand was steady as I pulled out the key, completely steady, which surprised me given the earthquake happening inside my chest. The key was small and brass, attached to a simple keychain with a tiny anchor charm that I'd thought was cute when we first got the beach house. I set it on the table with a soft click, right in the center where everyone could see it. The dining room went dead silent except for Emma's quiet sniffling and the tick of my mother's grandmother clock in the hallway. Everyone stared at the key like it was some kind of exotic object they'd never seen before. What? My mother started to say, then stopped. I didn't explain. I didn't announce what I was doing or deliver some dramatic speech about independence and dignity. I simply stood up, smoothed my dress, and extended my hand to Emma. Come on, sweetheart, I said quietly. Let's go home. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and slipped her small fingers into mine. She was still clutching the wrapped present she'd made for her grandparents, the painted picture frame with her piano photo that they'd never get to see now. As we walked toward the door, I could hear the confused murmur of voices behind us. What was that about? Rebecca asked. I don't know, my mother replied, though there was uncertainty creeping into her voice. Some kind of dramatic gesture, I suppose. My father said nothing. We made it to the front door before my mother called after us. Natalie, don't be ridiculous. Come back and we'll talk about this like adults. I paused with my hand on the doorknob For just a moment, I considered turning around. Old habits die hard, and I'd spent 32 years trying to smooth over family conflicts and keep everyone happy. But then I looked down at Emma, who was still holding that carefully wrapped present, and I realized something important. Walking away wasn't giving up on family. It was choosing the family that mattered most. I opened the door without looking back. The cold air hit us like a slap, but it felt cleaner somehow. Honest. Emma and I walked to the car in silence, our footsteps crunching on the light dusting of snow that had started falling while we were inside. As I buckled Emma into her booster seat, she looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Mommy, what was the key for? It was for the beach house, baby. Are we not going to the beach house anymore? I tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, marveling at how such a simple question could contain so much heartbreak and hope at the same time. No, sweetheart, we're not. She nodded solemnly, processing this information with the resilience that 8-year-olds somehow possess. Will you come to my piano recital tomorrow? She asked. The question nearly broke me. After everything that had just happened, she was still worried about whether she'd have someone in the audience who cared about her achievements. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I promised, starting the car. As we pulled out of the driveway, I saw movement in the front window. My family, probably trying to figure out what my little dramatic gesture had been about. In about 30 minutes, when my father tried to write the next mortgage check for the beach house, they'd understand. My phone started ringing before we'd gone 2 blocks, but I was done taking their calls. The ringing didn't stop. It started while Emma and I were driving home through the light snow, my mother's contact name lighting up the dashboard display again and again. I let it go to voicemail. Then it started again. By the time we pulled into our driveway, I'd received 6 calls from my mother, 3 from Rebecca, and 2 from my father, a man who usually considered calling me a last resort. Mommy, your phone keeps buzzing, Emma observed as we walked up to our apartment. I know, baby. Some people are having a hard time accepting that they can't reach us right now. Inside our warm, peaceful living room, I helped Emma out of her Christmas dress and into comfortable pajamas. She was exhausted from the emotional roller coaster of the evening, but she still had questions. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? I sat down on her bed, choosing my words carefully. Grandma and Grandpa are mad at themselves, even if they don't realize it yet. Sometimes when people know they've done something wrong, they get angry instead of sad. Did we do something wrong? No, sweetheart. We didn't do anything wrong. We just stopped accepting being treated badly. She seemed satisfied with this explanation and drifted off to sleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Downstairs, my phone continued its relentless buzzing. The voicemails were piling up, but I wasn't ready to listen to them yet. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, looking at the Christmas cards Emma and I had made together earlier in the week. Cards for the grandparents who had just thrown us out of their house. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so heartbreaking. At 10:47 p.m., my landline rang. I'd forgotten that my parents even had that number, but apparently my mother had been saving it for emergencies. "Natalie, thank God," she said when I picked up. "We've been trying to reach you for hours." "I know. I've been letting you try." "This is ridiculous. You can't just storm out of family dinner and ignore us. What was that business with the key?" I could hear voices in the background, Rebecca and my father having what sounded like an increasingly panicked conversation. "The key was for the beach house," I said simply. "I don't understand. What about the beach house?" The realization dawned slowly. I could actually hear the moment when it clicked. "Natalie," my mother's voice changed, becoming more careful. "You're not suggesting... You can't be thinking of... I'm not thinking of anything. I've already done it. I canceled the automatic payment authorization about an hour ago." Silence on the other end, then muffled conversation as my mother apparently relayed this information to the others. But you can't do that," she stammered when she came back to the phone. "We all agreed to share the expenses. It's a family investment." "Family," I repeated. "You just told me I'm not family. You told Emma she doesn't deserve to be with the real family. Remember? It was about 20 minutes ago. Your father was upset. He didn't mean those things." "Which things didn't he mean? That I'm a failed mother? That Emma will be a disappointment? That we should pack our things and leave?" I need clarification on which parts were lies, so I know how to respond. More background conversation, more urgent whispering. "Natalie, please. Let's all take a step back and discuss this rationally. Why don't you come back tomorrow and we'll work everything out?" "I'm not coming back. And I'm not working anything out. I spent 8 years trying to work things out while you made it clear that Emma and I were secondary members of this family. I'm done." "What about the house? You can't just abandon your financial responsibilities." "The house. Of course that's what she was worried about. I can and I am. You want me out of the family? Fine. I'm out. But I'm not going to keep paying for privileges I'm not allowed to enjoy. But the mortgage payment is due next week. Then I suggest you figure out how to cover it. The three of you managed to coordinate beach house schedules without me for 2 years. I'm sure you can coordinate payments too." I hung up before she could respond. The phone rang again immediately, but I unplugged it from the wall. My cell phone continued buzzing for another hour before finally going quiet. I imagined the conversation happening at my parents' house as they realized the full scope of what my little gesture had cost them. Not just the immediate mortgage payment, but the ongoing monthly expenses, the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance costs, all the bills that had been quietly disappearing from their lives because I'd been handling them. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. The next morning brought a new round of frantic calls, but this time the tone was different. Gone was the indignant anger of the night before. Now there was desperation. Rebecca called first, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Natalie, I know you're upset about last night, but we need to talk about the beach house situation. Mike and I can't cover your share of the mortgage. We barely make our own payments as it is." I let her talk to my voicemail. My father called next, his pride clearly warring with financial reality. "Natalie, this is your father. I think there's been a misunderstanding about last night. Call me back so we can discuss this properly." A misunderstanding. As if 8 years of marginalization had been some kind of communication error. My mother tried a different approach, calling during her lunch break with tears in her voice. "Sweetheart, please call me back. Your father feels terrible about what he said. We all do. Emma is a wonderful child and we never meant to hurt either of you. Can we please work this out?" By noon, I'd received 14 voicemails, 6 text messages, and 1 email from Rebecca that included a detailed breakdown of beach house expenses, and a plea for me to think about the family. The same family that had excluded me from decision-making, vacation planning, and basic respect for 2 years. Emma's piano recital was that evening, and I spent the afternoon helping her prepare. We ironed her white dress, practiced her piece one more time, and talked about performing in front of an audience. "Will anyone else be there for me?" she asked as we drove to the school. "I'll be there," I said. "And Mrs. Peterson from next door asked if she could come. She's excited to hear you play." "What about family?" The question was innocent, but it cut deep. "Sometimes the people who love us most aren't the people we're related to," I told her. "Sometimes they're the people who choose to show up for us." Mrs. Peterson was indeed there, sitting in the 3rd row with a bouquet of carnations for Emma. She clapped enthusiastically after Emma's flawless performance, and she took photos with my phone so Emma would have memories of her big moment. As we drove home afterward, Emma was glowing with pride and accomplishment. For the first time in years, she'd had a special moment that wasn't overshadowed by family drama or competing priorities. "That was the best day," she announced from her booster seat. "It really was," I agreed. My phone had been buzzing throughout the recital, but I'd kept it silenced. When I finally checked it at home, I found increasingly desperate messages from my family. The mortgage payment had been due that morning. The automatic payment I'd canceled left them scrambling to cover nearly $3,000 at the last minute. They'd managed to scrape together enough to avoid late fees, but the reality of their new financial situation was apparently sinking in. Rebecca's final text of the day was the most telling. "Mom and Dad are talking about selling the beach house. They can't afford the payments without your contribution. Please call us back. We can work this out." I turned off my phone and helped Emma with her bath, listening to her chatter about the other kids in the recital and her plans for winter break. For the first time in years, those plans would be just about us. No obligations to a family that didn't value us. No financial stress from supporting people who took my generosity for granted. No walking on eggshells around relatives who saw Emma as somehow less worthy of love. Just peace. The next few days brought more frantic attempts at contact, but the desperation in their voices was increasingly mixed with resentment. They wanted me back, but only to solve their financial problems. Not because they missed me or Emma. Not because they realized how badly they'd treated us. Because they needed my money. A week after Christmas, my mother left her most honest voicemail yet. "Natalie, I don't understand why you're being so stubborn about this. Yes, things got heated Christmas Eve, but this is punishing the whole family for one argument. Your father and I can't afford these house payments on our retirement income, and Rebecca can barely manage her own bills. We need you to come back to the arrangement. This affects everyone, not just you." She was right about one thing. It did affect everyone, but for the first time in 8 years, it was affecting me in a positive way. 3 months later, spring arrived early. Emma and I spent our Saturday morning planting flowers in the small garden behind our apartment complex, something we'd never had time for when we were constantly managing family obligations and beach house visits that never materialized. "Mommy, look!" Emma called out, pointing to a tiny green shoot pushing through the soil. "Something's growing." Something was growing indeed. Emma had blossomed in the months since we'd stepped away from my family's toxic dynamics. Her piano teacher mentioned how much more confident she seemed during lessons. Her grades had improved. She laughed more easily and worried less about saying the wrong thing. Children are resilient, but they're also perceptive. Emma had absorbed years of tension and uncertainty without even realizing it. Now that we'd removed ourselves from that environment, she was flourishing in ways I hadn't expected. My phone still rang occasionally with calls from my family, but the frequency had decreased as they adjusted to their new reality. The beach house had been sold within 6 weeks of my departure from their financial arrangement. My parents had downsized to a small condo, and Rebecca's family had moved in with them temporarily while they sorted out their own housing situation. The whole elaborate fiction of family unity and beach house dreams had collapsed remarkably quickly once I stopped subsidizing it. The most surprising development came in late March when my mother called with an actual apology. "I've been going to therapy," she said during a conversation that lasted nearly an hour, talking about family dynamics and patterns. "My therapist helped me understand that I treated you and Emma unfairly. It was progress, though I remained cautious about the motivations behind it. I can't speak for your father or Rebecca," she continued, "but I want you to know that I see now how wrong we were. About so many things. What specifically do you see?" I asked, genuinely curious. "That we punished Emma for circumstances beyond her control. That we took your financial support for granted while treating you like a second-class family member. That we convinced ourselves you were somehow less successful because you weren't married, when the truth is you were probably more successful than any of us." The acknowledgement was meaningful, even if it came months too late. "Where do we go from here?" she asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Emma and I have built a good life without the constant stress of trying to prove our worth to people who should have loved us unconditionally. I'm not sure we're ready to risk that peace." She understood, or said she did. Emma and I developed new traditions that spring: Saturday morning gardening, Sunday afternoon bike rides, piano practice that felt joyful instead of pressured, dinners where conversation flowed naturally instead of navigating hidden landmines of family politics. I also started dating again, something I'd avoided while dealing with family judgment about my relationship choices. Emma met David, a kind, stable man who treated her with the same respect he showed me. He attended her spring concert, helped with homework, and never once made her feel like she needed to earn his attention. "Is David going to be my new dad?" Emma asked one evening after he'd left from dinner. "I don't know what's going to happen with David and me," I said. "But I do know that whoever ends up in our lives will treat you like the amazing person you are from day one. No earning it, no proving yourself. Just love and respect because you deserve it." She seemed satisfied with this answer. As summer approached, Emma asked if we could plan a vacation. "Where would you like to go?" I asked. "Somewhere with a beach," she said, then paused. "But not the beach house. Somewhere that's just ours." We ended up renting a cottage in Maine for a week. Emma built sandcastles without worrying about impressing anyone. I read books and watched sunsets without calculating mortgage payments or managing family dynamics. We were tourists in our own lives, discovering what peace felt like. On our last evening there, as Emma played in the waves and I watched from our private deck, I thought about the key I'd placed on that Christmas dinner table. Such a small gesture that had changed everything. I'd thought I was just walking away from a toxic situation. What I'd actually done was walk toward the life Emma and I deserved. One where our worth wasn't constantly questioned, where love didn't come with conditions, and where family meant something beautiful instead of something painful. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting for people who never valued you in the first place. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find your way home. Emma ran up from the water, sandy and glowing with joy. "This is the best vacation ever," she announced, throwing her arms around me. "It really is," I agreed, meaning every word. We were finally free, and that freedom felt exactly like coming home. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in difficult family situations. What would you choose? The comfort of what's familiar or the promise of what could be?